that day that it would take me 25 years and a divorce and all kinds of things to like figure out the answer to that question. But the question he put in my heart was, what is like this feeling in my body?
When life kind of served you a big unexpected dose of sort of what broke open for you from like a personal perspective and how that translated into your work.
The magnitude of everything you're going to go through is going to be a portal to your deepest healing or growth, because
David A. Gerber is an explorer of both the wilderness and human potential. As a lion tracking expedition leader and executive coach, he guides people to rediscover their wild, untamed selves. With over 1 million views on his Tedx talk, step off the beaten path and pursue their highest calling with courage and purpose.
the way it's looking right now is I'd like to lead 2 to 3 retreats a year, and it's quite, so the most I can take is like 5 guests on a trip.
So how do you create the invite to get people to want in that and kind of combat with the like need to want an outcome in like that type of situation?
So many life parallels with it, and I let people know that are interested when I'm talking to them about going. I let them know a few things, and one of those things is...
All right, welcome back to another episode of Built for This, the podcast where we dig into mindsets, methods, and moments that forge leaders who don't just aim high, but go deep. So I'm your host, Jenna. Welcome back. And today I'm honored to introduce somebody who works at the intersection of performance, purpose, and transformation. David Gerber is a partner, executive coach, and speaker with Novus Global. He coaches Fortune 500 leaders, professional athletes, and high-impact creators to move beyond just high performance and instead build lives, teams, and companies that reflect clarity, courage, and contribution. More recently, David has launched lion tracking retreats, immersive experiences designed to reconnect leaders with primal leadership instincts, rest, and nature, and go deep into the regenerative power of slowing down. He designed these retreats to create space for intentional transformation out of the boardroom and into the wild. So today's conversation, we're going to explore the architecture of true leadership, how to lead when pressure is high, how to align what you do every day with the life that you want, and how to shift from resisting change into transformation. Welcome.
Good to be here.
For anybody listening, David and I have known each other for a few years now. We've seen a couple different iterations and good life moments along the way as we've grown and evolved as humans in this world. And so for everybody, I would love to kind of start off by learning a little bit more about kind of how you grew up, because it's a little non-traditional, and sort of
Sure.
how you got into the world that you're in now.
Our family moved every few years. And so my dad was in the military, and so every 2 to 3 years they move your family just because it seems fun to them. But I think it's just so you don't get too rooted in one area. And so I've lived in a lot of the Midwestern United States. I've lived in Minnesota, Arizona, North Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, Ohio, and then I've also lived in California for a good chunk of my life. So I've got a lot of Midwest background as well as like some West Coast background.
I never had to move growing up. So I just imagine kind of having this sort of like forced nomadic lifestyle, either really shaping who you are unknowingly along the way, because especially in teenage years, those are pretty like transformative years. And if you're having to kind of almost reintroduce yourself and find who you are again in all these different places, it can be difficult. So I'm curious at that time if how that kind of maybe inadvertently shaped your direction, or if you were kind of loving the life of, I don't know where I'm going to be in a couple years.
It was almost always a bit bittersweet or met with mixed feelings, because there was this fun of this like newness and we're going to go somewhere new. But also, so I would say it was easier as a young kid because I found that I made friends easier when I was younger. And then as you start to get older, where you realize you have insecurities or you have like you're self-conscious or whatever it is, then I found that to be really difficult. So when I moved when I was like 12 or 13 was really tough. And then I moved when I was 15, it was really, really tough. When you're moving, like when you're older and you have all those things going on and all those thoughts that you don't have as a kid, you just like make friends. You're like, whatever. You're just like walking to a school and you figure out how to make friends. And then as a teenager, though, it was much more difficult. And I realized all that stuff kind of came into play. And it was fun having different cultural experiences. Some people grow up in the same house for their entire life, which is just another form of it. But for me, it shaped into like, what's funny is I notice if I live in a place for like 3 years, I get antsy. I want to move to a different place or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Kind of hilarious. And I do travel a decent amount. So it probably certainly played into a lot of that.
And so as you kind of, move through the joys of being an adolescent and figuring all that stuff out and insecurities, what was the kind of path forward? If you kind of had a dad who was sort of in, we'll call like the military lifestyle, that would either be super attractive or I want the polar opposite of what I grew up with. What kind of excited you as you looked forward in terms of like what I want to be when I grow up?
Funny enough, I actually almost went into the military. There was a lot of things I loved about it. There's a good structure in the military, and obviously I knew that growing up, and then also just wanted my one of my kind of teenage or childhood teenage dreams was like to become a fighter pilot. And so, but then I also remembered, so I spent a year going down that road in college, and then it kind of hit me. I was like, man, I don't think I want that lifestyle. I don't think I want to move every 2 to 3 years. I like to be able to settle down to a place and have more of a choice of where I'm going to live. And so I actually backed out of that whole thing, which was really a tough decision because you can't just go anywhere else and fly fighter pilots. And so like, or fighter jets, it's like, it's one place you can go. And so it was a really difficult decision to back out of that. And I'm like really grateful that I did. And so I'm grateful for everything the military provided our family. And I'm glad to be on my own path at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and I always think some people have this like really clear trajectory, and then you meet those people like I always want to know, and they do it. And then you have all these for other people, myself included, like pit stops along the way where you're like, nope, I'm gonna go that way. No, I think I'm gonna go the other way now. And so coaching is really interesting because I mean, some people have an experience with a coach and they want to be able to kind of give back and make it in that way, or they inadvertently end up coaching because of a bunch of really interesting life circumstances
Yeah.
and fall into that with like no really ever plan of ever becoming that. And so to work with the type of people that you do, usually need to draw on some pretty cool life experiences and some like resilient moments. So I'm curious, how you kind of got into deciding that that's really where your skill set was really beneficial.
I would say that my pathway into it was the funny thing was I was really cynical about the whole profession to begin with. I was, somebody told me about executive coaching, leadership coaching, life coaching, whatever you want to call it. And I literally scoffed at it. I was like, you can't, what? You can't you can't do that. And I had like mentor when I was in high school and college, I would like mentor younger students or whatever it is as a way to give back. And I remember just feeling so much joy from it. I just never imagined you could actually make a living doing it. It'd be something that would create so much value that there's actually financial return on, doing the work.
Yeah.
And so then as I got into the field, because I always knew that there was, psychologists or counselors or whatever it was, and I knew there was that pathway, but it was such a funny thing in terms of my orientation growing up, was it always seemed like the people, and I hope this is respectful of people in the therapy profession, but it always seemed like those people were super sad and carried this heavy burden of like talking about people's problems all day long. And so that was my perception. Now, I don't think that anymore because I think there's definitely a way to compartmentalize whether you're a coach or a therapist or whatever it is. But I remember as a young kid, kind of growing into my teenage years where you start to kind of make sense of the world, therapy was one of the options I thought about. But then I remember people would be like, oh, yeah, but then you got to carry everybody's burden. And it seems like therapists are really sad, and it was like a limited viewpoint. Now, again, I don't think that
Yeah.
anymore. And I've had incredible coaches and therapists the last 15 years of my life. And I've through that process have learned like, oh, you can actually be a coach or a therapist, or you can be in this type of profession and not have to carry everything that people are going through. You can actually separate yourself from it. And in a way that's actually beneficial to you and also to the clients you work with. So then when I was in my late 20s, I remember was when I got introduced to like the formal coaching world. And I remember just still being like, this is such an interesting thing. It really quickly occurred to me how badly I wished I'd have had this when I was playing high school sports. Because when I played high school sports, I became what's considered like a head case where your brain is so tied up in knots, you can't just even enjoy this game. I mean, this was even at a high school level. It wasn't even like at a collegiate level yet. I remember just being so frustrated and wishing I could understand how to untangle these knots in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I could live just a more free life. And then for me at the time, I had like a lot of talent and skill, but I felt like there was this barrier between what I was capable of and what I was able to actually perform as. And then I would just get frustrated and become this cyclical thing. And I had no idea of how to get out of this.
Yeah.
And so I think that all led me to, my late 20s when I started to kind of get a hold of this way of seeing the world. I mean, understanding the human mind and emotions and everything and how it all works together. I was like, wow, like this would have been so helpful for me when I was in high school. And so as we work with, athletes at Novus Global, it's just fun. I think a lot of us are former athletes and knew what it was like to be up against that. And it's what partly what called us into this work was, man, we've experienced this ourselves, and then we now get to apply it to the athletes that we work with.
And I think it's such a fascinating thing as you grow and evolve. And one of the gyms I train at, they work with a lot of professional athletes too. And I was like dying because I saw all these like young guys come in. I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they like 16, all in like
Yeah.
summer training, recruits like NHL draft number one picks like 19. I'm like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like your whole entire life has been this one thing. You don't
Yep.
get summers with friends playing, like you were training, you have such a regimented lifestyle. And so just to, as again, as you alluded to have that space and have like any CEO, like you have to have a team around you to help you get through things. So I'm curious, did you go into like, I want to create a different style? And yes, there's a lot of coaches and health coaches, and there is, I'll call it some bad actors in the space, and that's people who are really have done proper training and like good intentions and really actually want to get people to that next level, or if they're stuck, help them break through. Did you start to see like, hey, could I create my style or what I'm going to be known for, or like a curriculum in a way that's going to really actually help people in some sort of meaningful way?
I'll do my best to answer that and tell me if I hit what you're asking for. But I do find in a lot of ways, what's great is this type of thinking and research and stuff has been around now, I would say, for a solid 50 to 60 years in some ways, like the frameworks. And then what's cool is you have different people come into the space, you see it, and then they take their own approach to it, which is really cool. And they maybe pull from other people's, like, throughout human history. This is how we do things and we evolve. And it's really, really, really cool to see. And so I can read a book by this coach or this therapist, or I can learn this modality or whatever. It's really fun to kind of like weave it in. And, one of the things that we at Novus Global that we were persistent on is, so we have about 60 or 70 coaches now. When I started, I was one of the original six, and we've been able to grow. And then one of the cool things about it is that we get to be like a team serving a team. And so a lot of times it's really a huge benefit. And then we get to all learn from each other because we've all agreed like, hey, we're going to be on this team together.
Yeah.
And so it's kinda cool to how that will mimic players on a team, right? So, like, if I was just a solopreneur coach, for example, which some people out there are, I don't have the benefit of being on a team, and then when I'm coaching a player who's on a team, there's just some things I won't be able to see that at Novus Global, like, being on a team helps us actually really serve people on teams because we know what it's
Yeah.
like to be on a team, we know what it's like to have conflict on our team, how to work through that, how to give and receive feedback. So there's a lot of stuff that we do actively that we are inviting our players into doing as well. And then I'll speak to me more personally, but this happens with all of our coaches at Novus Global is we do have like a basic framework of our work. And then we invite people to take and make it their own to a degree, right? So like stay within the framework, but also like make it your own. And so for myself, like I feel very strongly about a person's really holistic life, right? How well connected they are to their own mind, their own emotions, their own, nervous system, all that stuff. And I'm deeply passionate about that. I don't want to just help somebody get these incredible results on paper, but then their life's falling apart. And
Yeah.
so for me, I let a client know immediately early on. It's like, hey, I want this to change your entire life. I want your spouse to feel the effect of it, not just the fact that you're scoring more points or whatever it is. So that's like a really deep passion for me. And then I'm always continuing to learn, always reading different books that are coming up that are intriguing to me, and then pulling from those experiences to see how does that help me be a more well-rounded coach and serve clients better.
And I'm curious in terms of coaching and like iterations, and you think back to, impact and being part of a team. And then we also kind of just have life moments that just sort of level us. Whatever we thought we knew, we did not know. And I think we have a chance to rebuild and recreate and learn more about how to heal, and maybe be open to different modalities that we weren't before. And it makes me think of a moment where you, me, and a mutual friend were all going through heartbreak and all like in our own way, like laughing, crying through like a bunch of different moments. Because when you're grieving the loss of something in your life, whether it was 1 year, 7 years, 25 years, you just like unexpectedly just like can't handle it anymore, and you just have to immediately like full body cry. And I'm curious because in coaching, you have to coach and help people through a place of like deep empathy and understanding of what that sticking point is or that pain. So I'm curious for you at that point when life kind of served you a big unexpected dose of sort of what broke open for you from like a personal perspective and how that translated into your work.
Yeah. Well, so it's a simple question, right?
Yeah, we can touch on them. We'll get into, more like the primal wilderness side of
No,
things.
it's all good. Just for listeners, so like 5 years ago, I went through a divorce, which is what Jenna is referring to, and it was a heartbreaking divorce. I can't say I didn't see it coming, but it was, it wasn't what I was seeing. It wasn't what I expected for in my life, right? I didn't see it coming in that sense. Like I planned to be married for my entire life and have kids and all that stuff. And that just didn't play out that way. So here I was, at 38 years old, I was divorced, no kids yet. I had this experience of like, okay, now this is so interesting because I had not thought about what like being single at this stage of my life. And so there was this initial period after that where it was weird that you kind of have this like false bump, they call it, where you're feeling okay after like the initial heartbreak. And then you have this little false bump. And then I felt like 5 months after the divorce, it just is where it hit hard. And I luckily found my way to different practitioners, let's say, whether it's therapists, coaches, just people that I would bump into that would help. And I remember one of the therapists that I worked with, she described this idea of going throughout life. We have these things that we don't end up addressing because they just don't seem as pertinent as they need to be, or whatever it is, like things that are holding us back. And then when we go through something big, like a heartbreak of some sort, it oftentimes can kind of crack open this external, like a coconut almost, like it cracks open that external thing. And then the beautiful and bittersweet thing is that all underneath of all that's all this stuff that we haven't quite dealt with yet. You're like, oh, I thought I was okay there. I thought I was okay there. Right? It just brings out all these insecurities and highlights them and brings them to the surface. But it was also like reassuring because I remember when at that moment I was like, it felt like I was feeling and grieving so much more than just the divorce. It felt like I was grieving so many things. And I also was, but it helped me understand that. And then she also said something that was really beautiful. She said, the magnitude of everything you're going to go through is going to be a portal to your deepest healing or growth, because it's almost like the way I've heard it said recently is, it's almost like this idea of partly here on earth to do is to experience freedom,
Yep.
and then we have these constraints that we have. And then part of like growth is like, hey, we're like, I want to grow and I want to actually transcend the things that hold me back. When I was going through all of that, it just kind of all came into to focus that like, oh, this is actually something that's happening for me, not to me. And it's a big distinction we use in the work, and I'm guessing you do as well, Jenna. And so like as I began to sat with, and it's not something to just like flip a switch and like, okay, great, this happens for me, and it's like, oh, okay, wonderful. It's like no, it's a meditation to sit and reflect on of like, how is this for me? How is this for my freedom? A guy that I really appreciate his viewpoint, a guy named Peter Crone, and he says that life will present us with people and circumstances to reveal to us where we're not yet free.
Yeah.
And so like it began to help me see like the divorce, even being married for 10 years, even
Yeah.
all the things that I had went through growing up in a military household where I moved all the time, and in high school, like realizing how like, man, I don't have any self-confidence, what the heck, and like
Yes.
all that stuff was this big arc to say like the biggest thing that, if you're theological, like it's like the biggest thing that God wants for us is freedom. The biggest thing that life wants for us is freedom. And if you can see the arc of your life that way, that you can then I then being able to see all of these stops along the way. This is actually so I can grow. Like, wow, that's interesting. Versus like, oh man, why'd that happen to me? Why'd that happen to me? And that childhood thing and that thing. It's like, no, it's actually all like breath of fresh air to say this is actually for you. And I'm like, okay, and it takes some time reflecting on it. And then also you start to see that. And then when you start to see like stuff in real time, it's really fun because then you can actually see it in real time happening for your growth.
And I always think once you really take ownership of that perspective, like you mentioned, what is this teaching me? What am I learning? What am I growing from versus, the victim and stewing in it, and you
Yep.
get trapped in that box is one of the healers I worked with. And I mean, this was post a DMT experience, but now I think about it so vividly is like we've created fractures. Now you have this chance to be really intentional about how you refill each fracture you created to look at things a different way, or you're always going to go back into your same patterns because that's what you used to do to survive. So now, how do you want to go forward? And I think it's such a fascinating way, and especially depending on people who've had like long-term relationships or marriages, of this idea of this is what you're supposed to do when you grow up. You're supposed to have this marriage that lasts forever. You're supposed to do all these things, but then when it all kind of falls apart, you're like, but do I? Like, does it have to be built this way? What if it looked different? What if I got to create things in a different way that like filled me with joy and I had this freedom and it doesn't look like everything I've ever been taught to do? Sitting with that discomfort of like, what if everything I've ever thought or believed is a complete lie? And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, I gotta go, like, take a breather with that and, like, rebuild." But it's just, like, weird when you get, like when you look at it as freedom, it's like, okay, now, like, the real power is with you. You have the power of choice in every single thing you do. So what do you want to do with it? As you're going through this healing, was it tough for you to work with clients and kind of coach them as you're breaking apart? You're like, "You got this," or, like, trying to coach them through a bad time?
Yeah, I mean, I remember those times really vividly, and it was really difficult just because, like, yeah, my life, as I know it, was, like, just shattering, or at least the conception of it that I had, and yeah, and so I still needed to make a living, I still needed to work, and I still wanted to work 'cause, I don't know what to do, sit around all day, right, when you're going through something like that, and so I basically developed this routine for that first, like, 12 to 18 months of post-divorce where I got into a number of years before that even, I got into cold plunging, and so I basically would wake up, I would do a ice cold shower in the morning for 3 minutes because it would boost my dopamine 250%. So I'd wake up there's a point where I went to just to be transparent, I went through about 12 months of suicidal ideation, and, which is just, this feeling where you wake up and you're like, kinda like, "Oh, man, I woke up again. I didn't wanna wake up," you know? And so then I wake up and I'd like, again, I'm grateful for being alive, but also when you feel like that, people that are listening, that if you've been depressed or been in through times like that, you know what that feels like. It's like you're grateful
Yeah,
for life, but you also like don't want to be alive because it just feels like nothing's going to get better,
yeah,
and it feels insurmountable. And so I just knew from doing the cold plunges that like cold water immersion is seemingly well researched and healthy way to boost your dopamine. I do that. I wake up, I do a cold plunge, I do like a couple of calls, and then I would like schedule it out where I do 2 calls, then I do a nap, then I do another cold shower, then a couple more calls and a nap, and then a cold shower, and then I'd like oftentimes I just like meditate for a couple of hours at night because it was weird. Like being in the world was really hard, but then when I go like meditate or pray or whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
that would feel like better. I don't know why. So it'd be like 3 cold showers a day, 3 naps a day. So I'd gear up enough to get energy for calls, so I could be focused for a couple of calls, and
yeah.
then I'd kind of go recoup a bit. And so that was how I did it. I still remember so many times of just being like, "How am I gonna coach this person, right now?" And it just required me to set my world aside for a second and just show up and do what I do, which is listening to entirety of a person's being and seeing how I feel like they can strain themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one day I will never make this mistake again, but I remember I was like in the thick of it. I had a virtual therapy session and I thought it was going to be like not too bad. I was just like hyperventilating, crying on it. And at the end, I looked, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a meeting in 20 minutes and like I have to like pull it together.
Yeah.
And I'm like putting ice packs on my eyes because I couldn't not be on video. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, it's just allergies. My eyes are really itchy right now. And you do these like little things to like, okay, I just got to get through this because I need that income. Because at that time I also worked for myself as well.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like as you move through that and you have those moments, and I remember sitting on the floor just like, this is I've had it. Like I've had enough. I can't handle anymore. So like universe, if you could just either like take me out or just like give me something that makes this like weight a little less heavy, that would be really great. But then you get these little moments and these cracks and you start to kind of progress forward and you make it through. And so during the time shortly after that, I know you had the TED Talk come in, and there was the ego perspective and like letting that go and making friends with it. And was it, I'll call it, was the wilderness already calling you at this time? Or had you already kind of had an experience where you're like, I think that there's also something more I need to go after?
Let me take it all the way back, right? Because we're gonna talk a bit about the line tracking that I do now, and for people that are listening, it's like LION, like lion tracking, because people think line tracking. What's line? Like LINE. So tracking wild lions in Africa is become like a hobby and now a part of my business that I offer to clients. So I want to go back to an incident where when I was 15 years old. So like our family moving a lot. So we had just moved to Omaha, Nebraska, and I remember I was just super sad because I had all these friends from junior high, and I was up in a small town in Minnesota where if like you were a warm body, you could start at any sport, right? So like just like throw us out there and you could play. And I was like mildly athletic, so I actually could play. But then we moved to this big town of Omaha, Nebraska, or big city, or whatever you call it. And I just remember just being super sad, and it was like you're 15, I was 15 trying to find my way in this world, didn't really have a lot of self-confidence and all these things, and I remember I went for like 2 months at this new school. I didn't talk to anybody. Literally didn't say a single word to a single person. I would like go to even lunch where everybody hangs out, and I would literally sit down by myself, eat really fast, and then I'd throw my tray out and then go walk the halls because I didn't know how to go up and say hi to somebody and be like, "Hey, can I sit by you?" In the midst of all that, I remember my parents being, great parents trying to hold the family together, like, "Okay, we're gonna go to the zoo." I remember just being this like super hot Midwestern muggy day, right?
Yeah.
Where like your shirt sticking to you and all this stuff, and I'm just grumpy. And I remember like I'm like nothing's gonna cheer me up. Like
Yeah.
I am mad and I'm like in it, and I'm like, and I'm gonna
Committed to the misery of today. Like,
yes, and I am gonna like prove to the world that how unjust my life is. And so I remember having this thought, like nothing's gonna cheer me up. And then all I remember the next thing is we're at the zoo for, it was now the afternoon, and in that mode, and then all of a sudden I come around this corner and I see this lion. And I just it was one of those, like, mesmerizing moments, and if for people listening, I want you to think about I know there was almost certainly moments in life before you were 20 years old, maybe even before you were 10, where you had these mesmerizing moments, and I don't know what it would have been, whether it was seeing, being at, like, a Broadway play or whether it was a sporting event or a concert or something like that. There's these moments. They can also be, like, smaller, other things that aren't such a big deal. So I remember coming around the corner, I see this lion, and something it just kind of blew my category for like my brain didn't have like a category for this like type of energy and magnificence, all this stuff. It was like I remember so I, like it kind of like almost was like magnetized towards the lion on the other side of this piece of glass. I just remember the head was like bigger than my arms could get, like, and I was just so my brain's trying to compute this whole thing, but something instinctively drew me in. And I think it was the first time I would say I ever felt something alive in my body that I'd never felt before. And I couldn't explain it. I had no category for this. I mean, growing up in rural Minnesota, like I'd see like deer and like gophers,
yeah.
And so like this lion's like doesn't
This
fit.
exotic beast. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, man, I thought these were like, I don't know. It just felt like it was like something that was like a dinosaur to me.
Yeah.
And so I remember I look at this lion and I realize a few different things kind of came up for me. It's one was here was this wild animal that I could tell didn't belong in the cage, even though at 15 I'm like not thinking like that really.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you could see like it had a rub like a smooth spot on the back of its hindquarters, whatever it was, where it like rubbed up against this cage it didn't belong in, right?
Yeah.
And I also realized like I'm kind of in a cage in my life. I'm 15. I don't have a lot of self-confidence. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know where my life's going. I feel like I'm in a cage, So like we're both,
Yeah.
but then I also felt this like thing where it's like, well, I want to be wild, and I know this thing's supposed to be wild, and it's like this, just this, I don't know, this whole interaction, right?
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things I remember is like I feel like that lion put a question in my heart at that day that it would take me 25 years and a divorce and all kinds of things to like figure out the answer to that question. But the question he put in my heart was like, what is like this feeling in my body? And like, why do I feel so instinctively drawn to it? Now, I had no words at the time for that, but it was like a more of like a feeling or like an experience, kind of like it's like why people will pay, hundreds or thousands of dollars to be front row at a concert or a sporting event when you could just watch on TV and sometimes get a better view. It's like we go for that feeling and that experience. So like something like that happened for me when I was 15. And then if I fast forward a bit, so post-divorce, so I did do the Tedx talk 3 months post-divorce, which I still don't remember how that even happened. It was like a blur. There's a whole story about that. But like a few months later, I was in an Airbnb in Sedona, Arizona. So I went to Sedona to work with this lady who worked with horses and did breath work and stuff like that. I was just searching for anything to help me heal. And I still remember one time, it was like kind of those breaking moments where I'm in the thick of the suicidal ideation. I'm laying on the floor of an Airbnb, staring up at the ceiling fan. I just come back from riding my dirt bike, like on the trails of Sedona, which is one of the most beautiful places to ride a dirt bike.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have no pulse, it feels like, energetically.
Yeah.
And as I'm laying there, I remember thinking about the lions again. And I thought about this lion when I was 15, and I thought about lions. I'd been on a couple safaris in a vehicle in Africa. And then there was like this uptick in energy. And it was the only sense of wanting to be alive that I had at that point in time.
Yeah.
So that would have been summer of 2021. And then I remember a couple months later, I'm at this like business networking event in Napa Valley. There's actually an older event. And I'm talking to one of the guys there, and he has this like great question. He says like, hey, what is something you wanted to do for a long time that you just haven't made the decision to do yet? And instantaneously I knew like, I feel like I need to go back to the lions. But so often in life we have these ideas, but then all of our societal conditioning says that's not rational because it's like the most irrational thing. Literally from where I live and to where the lions are that I want to go see, it's literally 10,000 miles as the crow flies. This is no rationality to it. And so like all the social conditioning comes in of like you can't just go to Africa, you have a job, you got to figure this stuff out,
Yeah. Not
you
the
know,
right time. It's too far. Wait.
all
Yeah.
of it, right? But I knew at that moment, like instinctively, I need to go again somehow, some way.
Yeah.
So then through a number of things, it wasn't actually very quick. It was like another year before I went. And it was kind of cool. Different connections got put together, and all of a sudden I end up there on this trip, and it was on foot safari, which I was what I wanted, but I knew it was gonna be on foot with elephants. And I was just hoping that we'd find lions. Because I had heard that it's pretty cool to be on foot with lions. And even though I was mildly terrified, I was like, that sounds amazing. And I was really depressed. So like, who cares? I just like, let's just go for like full send on it.
Well, getting attacked by a lion if
Yeah,
that's gonna be the way to go.
why not, right? I mean, there's a lot worse ways to die, right? Or like less exciting. So I remember, so we went out the first day that we got there, we went out and we tracked lions, and I had my first experience on foot with lions. And it was like the moment from when I was 15, looking at that lion in the zoo and him asking like that, putting that question in me comes full circle post divorce of like, oh, like this is what the feeling in my body is. And the feeling was like aliveness. It was like freedom, aliveness, thrill, like something like that. So the first time I saw lions on foot, we were probably 40, 50 yards away from them. There's 4 or 5 lions there, and they were growling at us, but that's what lions will do to kind of let you know, hey, we see you. If they're just kind of growling at you, but they're not looking aggressive, you're probably okay because
Just like letting you know we're like, we're here.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that's an interesting thing. 'Cause I just always assume like if you were on foot with lions, they'd come after you, and it's like it's just funny that first experience where you're like, oh, they actually don't. They're not just like these crazy man killers. They're not like that at all. They don't want to.
Yeah.
They really don't want anything to do with us because we're like a foreign entity in their space. They don't know what's going on, and so you get to have this beautifully intimate moment where they're kind of growling at you. It sounds like the most beautiful Harley Davidson, being revved up. It's like this beautiful like guttural growl that like sends a shockwave through you. And it was like this sense of aliveness. And again, it connected the thing at 15 years old with now I was like 40 of this like undeniable feeling of aliveness. And I was thinking, I think it was Joseph Campbell that said it's like we're not looking for the purpose of life, we're looking for the feeling of being alive. And so often we look for the purpose and then we miss the feeling of being alive. But if we just follow what brings us to life, then we find our purpose in the midst of what creates aliveness for us, because that usually reverberates to other people as well.
And so for people listening, I think some people might hear like tracking lions, and then you kind of think of like big game hunting in a way to track them to have some sort of prize. So on the on foot safari, so in terms of tracking, sort of what is the idea in terms of setting out on this?
Yeah. So what I tell people, I always make the distinction between tracking and hunting. So the trips that I go on, I'm not hunting at all. It's purely just tracking to experience the lions on foot, like on their playing field, because there's a
Yeah.
different experience that happens. It's very, very different. What I've said is like, even though I might see the same lion as somebody sees in a vehicle sees, we're seeing a different lion. Because when you're not in a vehicle and you have no fences and there's really nothing to protect you, we do have a couple of rifle guides that are with to keep us safe in case something goes sideways. I've never had to use them. Most of the guides have never used them in decades of their experience. It's literally just there as like almost like a sense of safety. But there's no vehicle, no fences, no nothing. It's you're just there in the raw wilderness with these apex predators, and then you get to learn how they work and get to feel their energy at that level. You cannot feel that same energy in the vehicle. You just can't.
You answered the distinction for sure, which I wanted to make clear so that anybody looks like he's not going out there hunting lions to have this like extra big primal, experience of like man and beast. But in terms of kind of like I guess the purpose behind tracking and sort of what that like experience is like, and I guess kind of going back to like the purpose.
There's so many parallels to life. And so for people listening as well, there's one of my most inspirational figures in the space, a guy named Boyd Vardy, and he wrote a book called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life, which I can't highly recommend enough. It's a phenomenal book, whether it's leadership or just life. It's just so good and so many principles. And so a lot of it, what I've gotten into has been inspiration from him. Well, you can just make so many correlations between life and tracking lions. So for example, one of my favorite lessons of tracking lions is that oftentimes, first of all, looking for what's called a first track. which is essentially just you find a track that looks somewhat fresh, that within a few hours it's worth even going after and tracking. So that's the first thing you do in the morning when you go out tracking is we either walk from the camp to go look for tracks if we think that there's tracks close by, or we hop in the vehicle and we go look for tracks. And then once we find a track that looks solid, then we get out of the vehicle and we walk. One of my favorite quotes is from an American tracker, actually. He said that a first track is one end of the string, and on the other end of the string there's a creature moving. And that invitation into a mysterious, exciting way of living is just so beautiful, because it is, you see a track and it's like weird to think about, oh, on the, like, somewhere where this track goes there's a lion that lures me in to like want to see this lion. And like lions don't have wings, so like wherever this track leads there's a lion on the other side of this thing, and it's really fun to think about. So, and then the thing is, it's literally just one track at a time. So sometimes we want to like find the track and then go straight to the lion, kind of like in life. It's like we just want the answers and we don't want the journey of exploration. And so what's cool about it is just figuring out you find one more track and then one more track, and then you might find a place where, the lion, they'll mark their territory by, peeing and then scratching with their back legs.
Yeah.
So you'll see that. And it's like leading to where the lions are going. You're trying to figure out, are they hunting? Are they looking for water? What's going on? And so for me, what's been helpful in life is how do I just sense like what's the next thing to move towards, and then see what opens up. And so my tendency growing up, for whatever reason, was like I try to plan my life out 10 years in advance. And usually I was trying to like calculate so I could have life be comfortable and easy and no pain, which really just doesn't work. And so now, with all the line tracking stuff, what's fun is I literally just go, what's pulling me in its direction next, even if it's not rational, and then take that step and then see what opens up, and then take the next step and see what opens up, and not have to know what the future is going to hold, because so much is going to change. I invite people to like even think about a 5-year time horizon. If you take yourself and you listen to this and like think back to where you were 5 years ago, and think about how many things in your life have happened in the last 5 years that you had no concept of or couldn't even imagined. And that could be, when you went through heartbreak, or it could be like you got married and had kids. Like there's
Yeah.
your life cycle in 5 years usually dramatically changes a lot. So it's been helpful for me in that sense of just like move towards something and see what opens up, and not have to have all the answers 5 or 10 years in advance all the time.
What comes up right away when you talk about that is like my biggest lesson, I think, over 5 years is just surrender. And like I end up getting a big sleeve on my arm, and the whole like kind of piece of it is like surrender to transform is the whole theme. And, like, anytime as, like, a survival mechanism, because I like to control, and it's nice to, like, put the pieces in the puzzle, and especially if you're kinda A-type, highly productive, high achiever, the more you control, the more you're like, "Okay, I got this,"
Yeah.
and then something will happen, and you're like, "I actually have 0 control over everything, and
Yeah.
I am hiding and, like, almost creating more tension of what could be rather than, like, trying to make sense of, like, square peg, round hole. And I think as soon as and I mean, it's a practice all the time. It's not something you just, like, believe and then, like, ta-da, you're doing
Yeah.
it. It's, like, a constant practice. So I can imagine, like, seeing tracks, then if it ends up going nowhere that day.
Yeah. Well, that does happen, right?
And, but, like, we're so used to instant gratification too of, like, well, if I'm gonna do this, point A leads to point B. So
Yeah.
and then just dealing with like, "Oh, okay, so did I just totally, like, dissociate while tracking, or did I
Right.
actually, like, like, enjoy the, like, pieces and, like, the wonder of being in this, like, jungle or desert," wherever you are on that journey to just be like, "This is really cool regardless of the outcome."
That leads right into like another example of what you learn in the wilderness is that I had this thought last year of like the wilderness gives you what you need, not what you want. And it ties into what you're saying with just letting go. And I had this realization. It was like, man, when I go and I lead these trips with people and clients, is I hire one of the best trackers in the world. And there's still some days where we don't find the lions. And I just had this thought one day. I was like, oh, like, we show up and we do our thing and we track and we have a blast and we're learning. And it's almost like up to the wilderness whether or not it gives us the lions, right? Because where we go, there's no fences. It's wide open. It's like lions come and go to the certain blocks we track on. It's not a safari thing. It's not a safari park. It's not a zoo. And that's one of those beautiful parts about it, because that's how life is. Right. I think so often we try to create a life that's like a zoo where things are predictable and comfortable and that stuff. But again, when you see a lion in a zoo, there's something instinctively in you that knows that this lion's meant to be wild.
Yeah.
Like, it's born to hunt. It's born to, like, fight for its territory. That's, like, how lions are designed, and most wild animals, frankly. And this is not like a thing against zoos, right? It's like I do love that people can see these animals in zoos and whatever, but it's like when you see a lion on foot in the wild, it's like instinctively different, and you really start to find your way towards like, how do I just be present and trust what the wilderness is going to give me today?
And so when you have those experiences, I think it's one thing to have it like singular, like you go, you have this experience and you start to kind of iterate of how it reflects, where you've been stuck in your life, where you want to move and what you need to work on. And then in terms of thinking about like, okay, how do I invite other people into this experience? And, again, articulating in a way where people, especially if they're going to book a trip and you think about like, okay, I'm competing with like, you're going on safari where we're going to show you all the things, and I mean, I've been able to go on a safari, and we're lucky that a lot of lions came out, and there was all the little cubs, and I am like such an animal person. So right, I was like, is there any way that like I could get out and then like be near them, and like I just they're like absolutely not.
Yeah.
So if I could imagine me walking out there, seeing one like really just wanting to be like one with the lion, being like, I think I'm the person who could talk to them and like pet the lion. I would be probably a liability on this trip, but I would love it. Like there goes Jenna off and she gets mauled by a lion. Articulating that when people are used to like an outcome on a trip, right? Like we're gonna go, this is what to expect versus like you're gonna come and you're gonna travel not just like a 2-hour flight, you gotta come all the way to Africa
Yeah.
and you might not see one lion.
Yep.
So how do you create like the invite
Yeah.
to get people to want in that and kind of combat with the like need to want an outcome in like that type of situation?
There's so many life parallels with it, and I let people know that are interested when I'm talking to them about going. I let them know a few things. And one of those things is there is zero guarantee, right? I want to set the bar low just because that's a potential reality. I don't want to oversell and be like, oh, we're gonna, because you just don't know. And truly, again, since it's not a zoo and it's not a safari park, there's no fences that keep the animals in, and they do move around to some degree. And I invite people into that being the way they want it to be. I remember I was talking with one of my therapists, and I love I say one of my therapists, I have multiples.
Hey man, we've all got a
Uh,
few for
you know,
different reasons. Okay.
yeah, and I remember saying like, I was like, oh, I just want to know like when I'm going to meet my person again, and I want to know when I'm going to have kids, and I want to know all these things. And she like,
I want answers.
I want answers, right? And she so beautifully, what's fun is 99.9% of the time she's like super gentle and slow with me, and then once in a while she has like a good zinger. And she goes, "Is that why you go tracking lions? Because you wanted a safe, predictable, guaranteed life." She's like, "You could go down to the zoo 15 minutes from your house and guarantee you're going to see a lion.
Yeah.
But yet you fly 4 hours from Denver to New York, and then New York to South Africa is like 15 hours. So you go all the way over there for no guarantee." She's like, "What does that tell you about your spirit?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, that's so interesting." It's like, yeah, I love the mystery. I love not knowing. And it was like this weird thing that like landed in me. It's like, I actually don't want the answers.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she said, "Hey, if I could give you a book that literally had the rest of your life played out in it, and I mail that book to you and it arrives in the mail, what would you do with it?"
Yeah.
And I immediately was like, "Oh, I would burn it. I wouldn't want anything to do with it. I
Yeah.
would not touch it. I'd throw it in the trash, so I would burn it because I wanna make sure it's, like, not out there anywhere." It's, like, interesting, so that you could actually know everything about the rest of your life, and I would choose not to because I want that mystery, and that's what the lion trekking has taught me, is how do you embrace the mystery detached from an outcome, right? Because one time we were out there tracking, one day we actually decided to track a rhino, and we were tracking this rhino. Actually, for 3 days we tracked this mother and baby rhino. We thought was a mother and baby rhino. So we're tracking them for 3 separate days for like 4 hours a day. And I remember having a thought as we were tracking of like, oh, like I had this thought of like, I'll be so happy when we find this dang rhino, right? Because when you're out there tracking for like 4 hours a day, I mean, it's like you're just like, is
Yeah.
this thing a ghost? Like,
You
you
want a
know,
little reward. You're like, I'm
yeah.
I'm hustling. Like, give me what I want.
And then I just remember thinking like, "Oh, like, that has me being attached to a particular outcome."
Yeah.
Here I am walking in this beautiful wilderness, and I'm, like, away from my phone, away from cell phone connectivity. I'm out here in the wild, getting to be with myself and some amazing trackers, And here I am like complaining because we haven't seen them yet. And I was like, this is absurd. So I just had that moment with myself of like, wow, like what if I could enjoy this moment in this step in finding one more track as much as I could enjoy it when we find the rhino. And what that was like one of the biggest secrets of my life was that I learned was just like, what if I could learn to love not being in a relationship as much as I will when I am?
Yeah.
And all these different things and just to notice that and like when that's occurring for me, like how do I shift into like gratitude for this moment?
Yeah.
And so I would stop sometimes when we'd be out there tracking and we had seen nothing and I would just stop and I'd spin around and I just look at all these beautiful trees and the grass and the nature and this amazing space we were in. And I was like, this is what I've wanted my whole life was just this freedom. And here I
Yeah.
have it. And then I squash it sometimes and then I would remind myself of like, no, this moment's as beautiful as any.
Yeah.
And that's what taught me a lot about presence.
And I'm so curious because I've had, those moments myself, but it's really funny. And I've had to really stand tall when you get back to we'll call quote unquote real life and you meet people and they're like, you're so great. Like, how come you aren't married yet? Or like, don't you want kids? And you're like, listen, like, do you think that I don't want like a great partner to show up? Like, kids, maybe like I'm take it or leave it. I love my dogs. I'm okay. But it's so funny that people in those chosen situations really want to project what they have onto you and not realizing, depending on where you're at, that it's beautiful. And I've had to really say, I'm like, have I said something that makes you think that I'm really sad or like how my life is going is not great? Because I'm really happy.
Yeah.
Like, I get to do whatever I want when I want. When's the last time you did that? And they're like, "Oh," like, they're like, "But, like, here you are trying to, like, make me feel bad because I don't reflect the same lifestyle you have."
Yeah.
And, like, in different iterations of my life, like, I thought I would have a different life, much like you, like, "Well, I thought by this time, like, all these other things would happen." And then you're like, you know what? That's just not where it's at for me right now, and that's okay, and all
Yeah.
these other beautiful things have happened, and you get that space to choose different things to really, like,
Yeah.
just have joy and freedom. So I'm curious for you kind of, if anything where you've kind of been met with, like, I'll call it, "Hey, David, go back into your old ways of, like, self-doubt," or how you kind of translate wilderness back into we'll call it reality. Yeah.
I think I can speak more to the second question than the first. But in terms of translating, the wilderness back to like life in America or, Canada where you're at, what's funny about when you're over in Africa where we're tracking, it's like one moment you're literally sipping coffee around the fire in the morning at 4:30 or 5 or whatever it is. And then it could be like an hour and a half later, you're interacting with a lion at 30, 40 yards, or, sometimes I've been out there and 7 or 8 times a lion will actually charge at you. And so then you get to learn how to because the thing when the lion charges at you, you got to stand your ground and then the lion will actually stop and then turn around. It's like a spectacle. It's mind blowing to me. So it's weird to be like you can be having coffee and then 2 hours later you're getting charged by a wild lion and standing your ground and learning how to do that and calm your nervous system and all that stuff. And it's just like it's so intimate and beautiful and all that stuff. So then you come back to America and you're not like I'm not I'm having my coffee in the morning. That's still the same, but I'm not going out and facing lions. And so the way that I've really translated it has been to treat my coaching like I'm tracking lions. I'm writing a book right now that'll come out in April 2026. The title of it is called The Lion Is You. And because one of the things I noticed when I was tracking lions after, my divorce, I was talking to one of my other therapists, and I would notice it'd be so funny. I'd be like, fairly depressed. And then I'd get on a therapy call and I'd start talking about lions and tracking lions and I would get excited.
Yep.
And I remember talking to my therapist one time, I was like, "Why do I get so excited about this?" Like, it doesn't make I'm still trying to understand, like, why is this I'm, like, super depressed, I get on a call with you start talking about lions, and my energy goes way up.
Yeah.
And she said, I think I know why." And I was like, "Well, tell me." And she goes, "I think it's because you are tracking lions out there when you're out there." But she's like, "I think it's also because you're tracking a future version of yourself that you desperately hope exists." And it just like, tears come down because it's like, yeah, like that's what I want. And growing up, like I didn't feel like I had a lot of self-confidence, a lot of like the energy that lions have when they walk. And it was like, so it was like I was tracking myself, I was tracking lions, I was tracking this energy that lions exude that I just loved so much that I didn't ever quite understand growing up of like what it means to carry that fierce energy. So when I'm coaching, then what I invite clients to consider is like we're tracking this beautiful, like present, future version of you that has all of the characteristics that you want, and you're building your life and creating this thing. And we get to go track this with you,
Yeah.
together. And that's one of the ways that I bring it back to my daily life. And then the other way is just embracing so much of the mystery and the unknown and uncertainty of life that we try to figure out all the time.
Yep.
And so I just like let myself be unattached to a particular outcome, like when you're tracking, because if you're tracking and you're attached to an outcome, you'll oftentimes be frustrated because 99% of tracking lions does not involve seeing lions.
Yeah.
You're off for a hike, and then all of a sudden you look up 3 hours later, there's a lion there, it's like a weird phenomenon because you have to be vigilant the whole time, and then all of a sudden, oh, there it is. It's just like it's like such a weird,
Yeah.
concept of life. So I bring as much of that back into daily life as I can, and then just slowing down and just enjoying it.
And is there any kind of like, I guess, like framework or sort of mindset shift that you've kind of figured out from like a daily routine perspective of having that kind of full presence? And when you talk about kind of being out there, there is this kind of like commitment to like alignment that comes up for me of like, are you living in alignment with, you right now, but then also, that future version that you're working on becoming? Is there anything that's kind of translated for you when you come back of how to pull back into like that mindset when you feel like the world or daily life starts to want to pull you back out of that and kind of put you back into modes of operating that would be really familiar, but not necessarily who you want to become?
That's a great question. I'll do my best to answer it, and feel free to ask it again if I don't quite. But I think for me, it is building into daily life some sort of connection with nature. I just don't think we were meant to be indoors as much as we are. And so I try to do the best I can to get outdoors more often. And so whether that might be like a late afternoon hike, I obviously have the benefit of living in Colorado where I can drive, 20 minutes and find a great hike. But even just being outdoors and being in the sun, and I'll often go stand in the grass barefoot, just because I do think that there's something to that where I could be getting more done in my email inbox or whatever, Slack or whatever it is. And I'm just going to go choose to just go sit out in the park for 30 minutes and I think, for most of human history, that was just a part of things. You didn't have
Yeah.
something to go scroll on Instagram or whatever. You didn't have emails to check. You just, we were bored more and more often. So
Yeah.
it's a practice for me is to like this morning I woke up and I just went for like I don't know, hour long walk. And I didn't, I wasn't listening to a podcast and I wasn't trying to crank stuff out. I was just like, I'm just going to go walk and just
Yeah.
be outside in nature and not need to get anything quote unquote done. And I think
Mhm.
that's a huge practice that I really wish more people would adopt.
Yeah, and being in Vancouver, also very similar, very close
Yeah.
to hikes, water, lakes, ocean, everything you can imagine. And I remember one of the days my friend was like super stressed. And I'm like, can you just cancel whatever you have and like give me 2 hours? And there was like a big fight with him about, I'm like, just trust me. I've never been to this place, but we'll figure it out. Go into North Bend, find this like little hike that goes like right into a river. And I'm like, we're just gonna go sit in the river. And then we just sat there and like every like body down, shoulders down, and it was just like quiet. And we just sat in silence for like 40 minutes, but, like, water stream was flowing, all you heard is birds chirping, and it was just like, "Okay." And then after that, generally, like, whatever stress or problem, like, "Oh, okay, I know what to do, it's not a big deal."
Yeah. It's really intriguing how effective that is.
I love to draw back to nature. So in terms of the retreats coming, the books coming, what is your kind of goal mission with the retreats? How many do you wanna do a year? What type of people and, like, impact do you wanna make with this?
Yeah, so the way it's looking right now is I'd like to lead 2 to 3 retreats a year, and it's quite, when you're out trekking, I can't like take like 20 people, right? So like cuz you're out there. So the most I can take is like 5 guests on a trip. And what's cool is it keeps it really tight knit. So it's a very, I would say, like an exclusive experience. And then I hire really amazing people, trackers and guides and stuff to take us. There's this wonderful camp in South Africa that we go to that's wonderfully rustic, and I like that, right? Because you can go on some safaris. I don't know about yours, but like you can go on safaris where it's like, I mean, it's the
It's
nicest.
very, luxurious, shall
Yes,
we say.
which again, I'm not opposed to that It's quite nice, but it is kind of fun to be in a beautiful safari tent where there is some amenities like a bed and a toilet and things like that, and
Yeah.
a bucket shower, but there's not air conditioning or heat. There's not like you're more connected, I think, to nature and to what the animals experience. Like it's like interesting. One time when I was there, the winds were so crazy. I was like, "Man, my tent is gonna get ripped out of here, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna go." I mean, it was like 50. I think it was like 50 or 60-mile-an-hour winds, and you're sitting there in a safari tent, and I'm like, "Man, I feel like I'm gonna get like lifted like Dorothy and the Wizard of
As
Oz."
what is yeah, like what picked
Oh
up.
my gosh, we get dumped in this like somewhere in this national park. I think I'll lead like 2 to 3 trips a year. I'm also going to have just like I think it's what they call like a bespoke trip where if somebody ever wants to, obviously the price would be much, much higher, but like if somebody ever was just like, hey, David, I want to go I want to go with just me and you, or me and my partner and you, I'm open to that where I'll curate the whole thing and I'll curate a whole experience with it. And then if people just want to go spend 5 or 6 days tracking lines with me, we can do it. And I look forward to that as well. But in terms of like the group trips, I'll take 2 to 3 a year. And then I want to train other coaches at Novus Global to do that as well, so that I want more of it to happen, but I also realize like my life is here. And if I'm over there for, months at a time, it's an interesting dynamic, even though I love it. I realize my home right now is here and I want to have the community that I want to have here. And if you're gone all the time, it's hard to do. So yeah, so that's what's happening with the trips, and my website's a great spot to find out all the details about the trips. Every piece of information I can imagine on there, so people can
Yeah.
ask questions, or there's a Q&A and all that kind of stuff, or FAQ for people wanting to learn about it.
And what would you say from the people who have been able to experience this with you so far is sort of like the biggest takeaway or most surprising thing that they kind of walked out of that experience with?
It was funny. Obviously, the trip we went on last year, we had some great sightings, and so like there is almost a guarantee of seeing lions, although I'm always very clear there's no guarantee because it's the wild. But was interesting. So like there is all that, right? But there's a couple of things that really stood out to people. One is how much they loved being away from their phone, essentially, right? So there is like Wi-Fi at the camp that's like spotty and hit or miss, and it's so slow that the Instagram won't even like load, which I love, but it's only available in like a very small part of like the main area. It's not available in your tents. And so what's cool about that is there's no option to get on your phone in the morning and at night because it doesn't work. And so you end up spending more time just sitting around the fire in the morning, having coffee, talking to people than you are like catching up on whatever's going on in the world. Same thing at nighttime after dinner, we sit around the fire and just tell stories. And so like there was something so nourishing about that for people that I think they didn't realize like how much they love just being silent and alone and not alone, but like silent and quiet and just staring at the fire. And then pretty soon somebody has a story come up and then somebody else has a story and then people stare at the fire and things like
Yeah.
that. So that was one of the biggest things that people love. And then I think just when we were out, that experience of just like getting comfortable with just not knowing what's going to happen. The guests that I had this year, just they loved that mystery. They loved the awe. They loved just like the sense of presence it calls you into, because even though you may not be seeing lions, there are buffalo out there, there are rhino out there, there are elephants, and all three of those animals can be very, very dangerous if you're not aware. And so everybody in the group has got to keep their eyes open at all times, because things can go from 99.9% of the time everything's fine, like you're hiking like in Vancouver, and then all of a sudden things can change very, very quickly. And so you've got to be alert and vigilant, and the guides are there to keep you safe and tell you what to do and all that stuff like that. But it's just it's shocking how quick they can go from like just on a walk to like, okay, we need to make a game plan really quickly and you need to pay attention,
Yeah.
because again, it is the wild, and a rhino's a 3,000 4,000 pound animal
They are not small. Yeah.
that can move like an NFL running back. I mean, it's insane. In
Yeah.
Buffalo are like 2,000 pounds, and do that. So there's like that beautiful, like beautiful sense of presence it calls you into, because it's like what I've heard is like the same brain waves fire when you're meditating, because it's like the primal part of you knows I need to be present, because if
Yeah.
I check out, like, like it could be dangerous.
Yeah.
And if we stay present, it dramatically lowers any sense of danger that could happen.
instant kind of, I'll call it the old school primal fight or flight type attunement that you need to have with nature in those situations, which I think translates so well from like a leadership capacity about being like operating from like fullness and presence and not scarcity and kind of control to really be able to domino throughout your life in a lot of really impactful ways. And, for business kind of leaders listening and or anybody who's kind of on their own development journey and kind of feels stuck in some way, much like everybody has been at some point and not sure where to go. I think this is a really interesting invitation to look at the world in a different way and lean in. But maybe from, your perspective, what would be, like words of encouragement or like the first step to kind of help somebody get unstuck?
There's probably a few different ways I could answer that. I would say one of the biggest ways I'd answer like this, the question around being stuck would be to reconnect with what aliveness feels like to a person. And again, for that might be mountain biking for one person and literally crocheting for another person and another person that's writing poetry or music and another person that's dancing and another person that's playing pickup basketball. I would invite them to start connecting to the things that did keep the spark aliveness in them and then just keep following that thread. Again, it will feel irrational at points, right? It might be book that dang flight or that trip that you've always wanted to take. Just go do it. So often what happens is we plan our lives to really live when we're 65 and retired, and then we got to work to the bone until we get there. But the thing is, none of us know if we're going to make the 65.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement is like live now, like take that trip now, like find a way, right? So like because it's like you're either going to find a way or you're going to find a bunch of excuses, and there will always be excuses why not to take that class or that trip or whatever the heck it is. There's always good reasons not to. And so my encouragement to people that feel really stuck is track in your life where you felt alive. Like for me, that line when I was 15 was a breadcrumb that I never knew existed until I really started to uncover my life. And I assure you, anybody listening, that there were things that happened in your life in your childhood and teenage years that created aliveness for you. But again, for me, I almost shut it down because it's like, I can't just go be with the lions. I got work to do. I got this, I got
Yeah.
that, all these things. Like it was irrational. And it's the thing, like, even though it's irrational, it's the thing that's created the most aliveness for me. And I
Yeah.
find a lot of times it is the irrational things that we feel drawn to that create the most aliveness in us.
Yeah.
And then take one step at a time. So like when I've planned a lot of my trips, sometimes like it was just make one more call, one more, I didn't have to figure everything out at once. So just follow that thing. So it might be like, go take an improv class. You don't need to sign up for a whole semester or whatever. Just go take one class doing improv and see if you enjoy it or whatever it is, or go do an ice bath somewhere and have somebody coach you through it. Like do things like this that stretch you or create some sort of aliveness. That's what I would do. And if I was coaching somebody, it'd be like, we're going to do that every week for like 6 months and then throw a bunch of other stuff in there as well. But it's like, where are the risks? Where are the things where you're following the aliveness and not just doing what you've been societally conditioned to do for a long time? Because I think that's what creates the stuckness.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so simple, but it's so true and how much people easily forget just the power of one small step. And again, not trying to focus on the end game. Like, and again, if it's like, I just need to pick up a book because I loved to read.
Yes.
Like one page, if it's one page a day, like that's it. Like nobody's asking you to become an author at the end of it and publish, all of that. Like those little pieces create such a domino effect.
Yep.
And I think it's so important as people struggle with different things every day. And so I'm curious maybe to give people a little teaser alert of like what people can expect from your book and what sort of
Yeah.
what that's going to be about.
Yeah, so the book will be a lot of what we talked about so far, but a lot of it was so the title is The Lion Is You, and the subtitle is gonna be one of two things, but I think it'll be Lessons from the Wild about how to become alive, or lessons from the wild on becoming alive again. It's meant to be a bit of a field guide for finding your aliveness. And how do you follow those breadcrumbs of things that have sparked your energy? Kind of like me laying on the floor of the Airbnb, like thought about the lions and my energy sparked. I don't know why. And so for people to reconnect to those things and then to follow those things and see what opens up. So the book has a lot to do with that of inviting somebody to track their own life, like essentially. And one of the metaphors I use is I say that like life has always been laying tracks for us. And it's our choice whether or not we see them and how we see them, right? So you can see your entire arc of your life as imagine a mystical like lion has been inviting you to track it. Like I had this thought too of like, what if the lions were over there laying tracks for us to come track them? I mean, it's an absurd thought, but it's like really fun. And it's like, so like, what if your whole life, if you went back into your past and you saw the tracks and then you choose to see it as if, oh, these tracks have been inviting me into my best life and my best freedom and aliveness the whole time, even the heartbreaks, even the difficult times, even the failures. It's always been that it's been tracking. And so like the whole thing's like a field guide on how do you track your own life and how do you go into the past and track it, and then how do you go into the present and track it, and then how do you like create a future where you're tracking that the rest of your life, and
Yeah.
that's what it's designed to do.
I'm excited to read it. So as we kind of close out, I'm going to do rapid fire questions with you. First one is, what is a quote you've had a couple quote or mantra that you return to when the pressure's on?
One of the mantras I always come back to, which is funny, you alluded to it earlier, was like let go. And it's one of the things I do actually when I do ice baths. I just did one last night. When I get in, it's funny because I also will use sometimes I'll use a mantra of like this is easy. And so I'll get in the ice water and I'll, sit there. And it's funny because all you have to actually do is just sit there, right? Now, super uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's
Um,
cold. Your body is like,
yeah. And it's weird though. It's like, so if you just sit there, you're gonna be there until you decide to get out. And so oftentimes what I've noticed is usually between 45 seconds and 90 seconds in ice bath, my whole nervous system just like lets the water envelop it. And it's this beautiful feeling. And I'm kind of ruining your rapid fire question here. It's like your body relaxes and it shifts your brain to say from saying like this is hurting me to this is actually helping me, you know? And even I would say like healing me, like it's helping me be present and it forces me essentially to be connected to my breath because the discomfort externally is so much. And I always just say like if I can take one more breath, one more breath, one more breath, and then it's just like let go as I breathe, let go, let go, let go. And that's like the biggest mantra. I'm trying to think of a quote. There's so many that I have in my head. One of the ones I had recently, I don't even know who it's from, which is funny because it was an anonymous quote when I first heard it, but it was, I rarely like the things that make me better when they're actually happening to me. And and so, like, when I'm in difficult moments, I remember that, and it's like because when I look back, the things that were the hardest were often ones that made me the most better, and so, like, when I'm going through them so now my work in life right now is how do I actually enjoy it when I'm going through it? How do I enjoy when I'm having some anxiety? How do I enjoy when I'm having a lot of discomfort around something going on in my life, whether it's I'm uncertain about what to do with my business or a relationship or whatever it is? It's like I just, like, sit with it, I go, "What if I could, like, actually enjoy this right now? Because I know it's making me better, and I may not see it for 6 months, but, like, dang it, like, I don't wanna rob myself of this moment, you know?"
yeah.
So that's the quote that comes to mind, although I'm sure there's many more in my head
It
somewhere.
reminds me of one I've been seeing a lot lately where it's like pressure is a privilege.
Yeah.
Like that kind of was like, okay, it could be easy, but then I'm just, operating the same way versus like growing and gonna become better because of it. I
Yeah.
know ice baths are a ritual for you, but do you have
Yep.
any other kind of rituals that sort of help you reset and refocus?
I do a decent amount of breath work. Breath work I've found to just be one of those, like, "How did I not know about this my whole life?" And so whoever's listening, it's like there's probably 100 or 1,000 different modalities of breath work, and you can go to group classes in your city, or you can work with practitioners one-on-one, and I think it's all wonderful. I love going to group classes because it's like a communal experience. But I will, if like I'm like I feel like I'm like needing a reset, I'll just go lay on my bed and I'll do like I know certain cadences, and so I'll work through those. And sometimes it's like 45 minutes of, and they say it's breath work. It's not breath easy. It's breath. Breath work's hard and it's challenging. I will do that oftentimes to reset. I'll go out, hike in nature. If I can jump into a cold river is like the best ice bath. It's way better than just like a bath at home. Eat ice cream.
The best. Also, I'm like, there's some things that just only ice cream can fix, in
That
my opinion.
nothing more true. Put that quote on here. Something only ice cream can fix.
Exactly. I feel like it's calling in like a good ice cream
That's
sponsor.
right. Yes,
Uh,
that's right.
it would be really helpful for me. Maybe not necessarily my calories per day, but I'm here for it. If you had to pick one capacity, resilience, vision, empathy, discipline to master first, which one would you choose and why?
I would probably pick discipline because I think discipline's the hardest thing for me. I'm very much not naturally disciplined. And someone's like, I fight discipline. I'm like, I want to be free. But then I remember reading a quote one time that said, only the disciplined are free. And I was like, man, that is so true. And I hate it, But I would say, yeah, discipline would be the biggest one because when I am disciplined or I'm in certain seasons of life where I've noticed I'm more disciplined, I feel better because I'm like hitting my marks. I'm like cruising and I'm getting stuff done and not in like a lot of avoidance. So yeah.
I find that as well too, but it usually has to do something like specific type of workout routine, like some sort of release that has to happen, then everything else kind of falls into place. What's a book or resource that changed the way you see leadership?
Can I say two?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to put a shameless plug in for the book that we wrote, or Jason, our CEO, wrote, called Beyond High Performance. It really did, because there's a beautiful story he tells at the beginning of the book that I love coming back to, that I'm trying not to ruin the story, but like it ends with this idea of like, I didn't realize I could do that. Right. So it's basically about a story about a woman who lifted a car off, I think off her son, because like her son was trapped underneath the car and she was able to lift the car up by herself or something like that because her adrenaline kicked in, or it's just like these
Yeah.
crazy stories like that. And then after it all happens, she looks back and like, I didn't know I could do that. Right. And I think for most of my life, I lived such a safe life. And this is part of what I talk about in the book as well, is it's really like the transformation of myself from being like a caged lion to like a wild lion. It's fun now in my life looking forward and saying like the things that I want to look back on and say, I didn't know I could do that. Right. So whether it happened this year where I never knew I'd be able to like lead a trip tracking lions with other people, and then to be a part of my business that I would like make money doing what I love is just mind blowing to me. And so I can look back on that and go, I didn't know I could do that. And so like I think the book's phenomenal, and it's got so many leadership principles in it, and about like, one of the things we talk about in the book is, if you have a vision that you can do on your own, it's too small, which requires you to be a leader.
Yes.
In order to create a team to be able to do something. I love so much of it. And then the other one is the Line Tracker's Guide to Life. I think there's so many leadership principles in there. And so it's not like a book that's like, just like, here's how to lead better, it's like, but it's got so many great stories in it. And Boyd's become a dear friend of mine. And so like, it's just maybe like non-traditional book that you would think about leadership.
I love it. Last and final question. In your own words, define what built for this means to you.
It's this idea that everybody is specifically wired for their calling. And so you are actually built for this, and this meaning the most alive and free version of yourself. I think that everybody's built and I think has intrinsic wiring in their nervous system and their whole arc of their life for them to live out their fullest capacity, creates a ton of joy in them and also a huge impact in the world. And I think everybody is built for that.
For anybody listening now, as we wrap things up, do you already have your next retreat planned? If somebody's like, I need to get on this lion tracking retreat ASAP, I know we'll have the website linked and everything, but kind of what is the best way to keep apprised of knowing when you're thinking about doing those things and being able to jump on those?
So the best way would be either to just send me a DM on my Instagram or go to my website. There's like an application that you'll be able to fill out. So like it'll be July or August of 2026. I'm still firming up dates with the camp and my whole team that I'm curating. And so it'll be July or August of 2026. And those dates will be up probably even by the time this releases, the dates will be up. And so you go to the website, fill out the application or send me an email, just let me know and I'll add you to the list. And then it's really just like moving towards like a heck yes or no, because we got to get really clear on like, are you in or out? Because it's just important like to plan these things months. I want to have the trips filled by the end of the year.
And how long are the retreats?
So they're 5 nights and 6 days.
Okay.
So you arrive on day 1, leave on day 6, and then you get 4 full days of tracking plus like a couple of half days of tracking in there, and it is wonderful.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. It was so fun to hang out and chat with you, and I'm excited to read the book when it comes out, and we'll talk soon.
I'm so excited. Thank you.
You bet.
All right.